Hotend upgrade? None. Stock hotend is perfectly fine for PLA. Again? E3D. Check your mail. That was just freaking weird. The all-new E3D Revo CR. Let's check this out. It was not quite a year ago that the folks at E3D released the Rapid Change Revo system upon the RepRap community. What we have in front of us today is the newest in the Revo product line, the Revo CR, the Creality variant. Let's take a closer look at this and we'll talk about the Revo system a little more. Popping open the plain Jane eco-friendly box, we find the hot end sitting in a paper tray that's also recyclable. Now this comes with a 0.4mm nozzle pre-installed. You can get a basic setup that is just that, or this kit form, which also comes with the 0.25, 0.6, and 0.8mm nozzles. There's a new 0.1mm nozzle, but they don't seem to be including that in kits yet. Underneath the tray, we'll find two wire sets. You have the heater circuit one and the thermistor circuit one. Both are well terminated for use in, say, a Creality type machine. You've got ferrules on the heater circuit one, and on the thermistor one, you have a DuPont connector that'll plug into your main board. You also have a set of splice connectors inside of here. I don't love these things, but I understand why they're here. It's so if you don't want to have to replace all of your heater circuit wiring, your thermistor wiring, you can use these to replace the ends of your wires right at your hot end to save yourself some trouble, or to tie it into something like an Ender 5 Plus, which is going to have significantly longer wires. This can save you a lot of trouble in that regard. For anybody who's not familiar, let's quick discuss what are the Revos. There are timestamps below if you're well acquainted with this and you want to skip ahead. The Revo family is a line of hot ends from the folks at E3D, makers of the venerable V6, which has become the de facto standard in 3D printing for a while now. The Revo line is a truly one-handed and toolless nozzle changing system. You just grab the nozzle once it's cooled down enough to touch and spin it out with your fingers. You get the nozzle and its incorporated heat break out of the heatsink in about 15 seconds. The nozzle and heat break are one complete unit, and they are considered an all-metal design capable of printing higher temp materials like ABS, ASA, and nylons. The hot end has this unique round heater element that surrounds the melt zone of the nozzle, incorporates the heater and the thermistor into there, and attaches to the heatsink via a little coil spring. That also puts pressure on the nozzle to both hold it in place once it's installed and keep the heater element where it needs to be. The Revo heater elements are rated at 40 watts and capable of 300 degrees Celsius out of the box. Personally, I replaced the E3D V6 in my Prusa Mark III S Plus with a REVO Six, which is meant to directly replace the V6 hot ends, about a month ago, and I have not regretted it in the least. I have had multiple days where I changed from 0.4 to 0.6 to 0.8mm nozzles all in a single day worth of printing. And now there is the Revo CR. Up until now, you have been able to install a Revo into a Ender 3 or other Creality machine, but it required some type of 3D printed adapter or machined adapter pieces to make it happen. This one, however, is directly intended to replace a Mark 8 style hot end with no other modification required, not even firmware changes. This means your CR10, your Ender 3, any number of Ender 3 clones that use a Mark 8 style hot end, they're all going to be able to just directly swap to this setup. Let's see what machines I've been able to fit this onto so far. Will it fit the Ender 2 Pro? Yes, it will. An Ender 3 Pro, base model, or V2? Yes, of course. I mean, it'd be silly to release this product if it didn't fit the frickin' Ender 3. But what about all the Ender 3 clones on the market? Something like this Elegoo Neptune 2. Unfortunately, not without some modification. Yeah, see, this one has a bit of an issue. The problem with this particular clone is the hot end is in the middle of the carriage plate with the hardware for the lower V-slot wheel directly behind the heater block. So when you try to install the Revo CR, it hits that hardware and prevents it from being properly installed. I did find that about 3 to 4 millimeters worth of washers stacked up, or a 3D printed spacer would probably put it into a range that would mount properly, but you might have to modify the top of the fan shroud to make that work. This is a relatively minor issue. I just wanted to make a point about it, so if you have an Ender 3 clone of some type that you want to install this on, you'd be aware of this going into the project. Hey! Just before we install this thing and test print with it, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon. It is thanks to you folks that content like this is at all possible. Making these videos requires days of effort, various materials for test printing and putting these parts together, and you allow that to happen. I greatly appreciate it, and I just released a new can cup design with cans for the handle that holds your 12-ounce can nice and securely.
Blizzard test.
Find the Patreon link in the description down below, and if you want to help out for free, please consider subscribing. All right, let's get this thing installed and printing. We are going to be putting this in my original Ender 3, the one that I have owned the longest at this point. This is the machine that I legitimately want to use this hot end in, and the one that I print with the absolute most. So I thought it would be a really good way to compare print results that I usually get off of this machine to switching over to the Revo. Time to get to work on this thing. Quick tip on how to push a couple of wires through your nylon sleeving. Put some heat shrink over the end of your wires to cap them off a little bit and give them a slightly smoother tip to them. If you try to push them through with just the wires, they're gonna grab on the holes in the nylon sleeving as they go. With this, they have a much less chance of doing that. So I've got my wires run through the harness and into the electronics box. Now, the problem I've run into is the thermistor harness is pre-terminated with a DuPont connector. But the connector right there at the end of the main board on this board, which is a Big Tree Tech SKR Mini E3 V2, is a JST XH connector. But that's the same connector that the factory Creality board uses. It's not just this aftermarket board. As you can see here, the thermistor port is also in the same location on the Creality board as on the Big Tree Tech board. That DuPont connector is just not correct for this application. I was able to force it onto the port, and it seemed like it was going to work, but I didn't love it. So I ended up taking it off and putting a proper JST XH on the end of there, which did require recrimping. After spending all the time of fishing the wires through the Creality harness, I ended up pulling them back out and making a sub harness of just the thermistor and heater wires. This worked out way better, and it's what I would recommend for you to do. On this machine, I am running the Hero Me Gen 6 fan shroud. I've been running the stock hot end with that for a while now. And the Revo CR, well, it has a more rounded and larger heatsink body compared to the factory Creality hot end. As such, it didn't fit in the Hero Me fan shroud. I had to hog it out with a die grinder, open it up a little bit to create clearance for the new heatsink. It was not a hard modification to make at all, but it's something you should be aware of. If you're running the factory fan shroud, this is not something you're going to have a problem with. It fits directly in there. E3D does recommend you do a PID auto tune to get the most out of your new hot end. I'm not going to include that in this video just to save some time. Let me know in the comments if you want me to put together a little bit of a basic tuning guide for your machines. And the last little touch on my install here, I jumped into Fusion 360 and designed up a little nozzle holder that goes on the top extrusion of the Ender 3 and will hold 4 of the Revo nozzles in it. This is inspired by a design that I got off of printables that I printed for my Prusa when I did the Revo swap on that. Now let's get into test printing with this setup. To test a Revo CR, I wanted to print the same thing at different scales and do it as quickly as I could to really show the power of a system like this. So I ran off and printed the Flexi Dolphin from Flexi Factory. Because I've printed this design many times, I have prints from the old hot end that I can compare to, and it just felt like a good call. Looking at these prints up close, they're not perfect. They have some room to improve. Comparing the 100% scale 0.4mm nozzle print with the Revo to one that I did at 150% with the old hot end, the old one just looks better. But you have to remember that that is after thousands of hours of printing on this machine and many hours of tuning that I was able to get that beautiful 150% scale Dolphin. There's something I really need to highlight here that the 0.25mm 50% scale Dolphin is a great example of. When you are changing nozzles on any machine, you should re-level your bed or adjust your Z offset if you have something like a BL Touch on it. I did that with all 4 of these prints, but I didn't do a good enough job on the 0.25mm 50% Dolphin. The first layer on this looks pretty terrible, and I'm not at all happy about it. I clearly had the level off on this one and didn't do a good enough job. Another thing that I ran into that is again my fault is I ran the same temperature settings on the filament that I would have run with the stock hot end. On the overhangs of a dolphin, it looks like the material was a little bit overheated, and mind you, this is with dual 50-15 part cooling fans running at 100%. Realistically, I should be temperature tuning all of my filaments again with this machine since it's technically different now. For completely changing hot ends on this machine, going from a PTFE lined one to an all metal design, I think the results that I got at all 4 nozzle sizes are pretty darn good. Plenty of people have done FlowRate testing on the Revo system to this point, but I wanted to do at least one test in this video. I tested the Creality stock hot end versus the Revo CR on this little circle design that I have graduated heights on to increase the speed at. The stock Creality hot end started to show immediate problems at 15 millimeters a second. It just capped out and was immediately under extruding to the point that before it reached the 20 millimeters a second height, it actually knocked the print clean off the bed and started to print spaghetti. The Revo CR, however, had quality issues at 15 millimeters a second, maybe some minor under extrusion, but nothing like the stock Creality hot end. It made it to the 20 millimeter a second height where it absolutely massively under extruded, but it was actually able to complete the print. Not exactly a scientific flow rate test, but a mild improvement in flow rate for the Revo CR. Something I never did with that stock hot end on that Ender 3 was print ABS or ASA. All the parts for my Voron V0 were printed on my Prusa. So I started printing the tool head for my stealth burner that's going on my Voron 2.4, and I did run into part curling issues. This is ASA on an open machine, and the AC is running in the studio, so kind of to be expected. But overall, the print quality looks pretty darn good. If I get around to building a temporary enclosure or just turn the AC off in the studio for a day, I could probably get those parts printed pretty well on the Ender 3 now. Side note, I'm probably going to do some live streams when I build my Voron 2.4 as I did with my V0, so get subscribed so you don't miss those. It's conclusion time. Let's wrap up the pros, the cons. What do I really think of the Revo CR? TLDR, I love it, and I am so happy to have this in my Ender 3 now. Changing nozzles feels like a slicer setting now. Right before a print, I can decide, no, I want to use a 0.8 instead of a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Something like these 150% dolphins. I recently did a run of these for my shop, and I was printing a couple of them with 0.4 millimeter nozzles, but it was taking so long. I decided to switch to a 0.8 millimeter nozzle. Arguably, I made a stronger print that way, and they were done in a half the time. And the Revo is what gave me the power to make that decision. If I had to stop and change a nozzle manually, holding it with a wrench and loosening things up, it's not that hard. I understand that. And it doesn't take that much time, but it just feels daunting and more stressful, worrying about damaging wires or twisting a heat break. Any of that, I don't love it. The Revo is just stress-free to use. I can't overstate that. Bit of a neutral thing, the Revo CR is not a cheap hot end. It's about $90, and it is an all-metal hot end that comes with a heater and thermistor, but that's for just with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. It's $140 with all 4 nozzles that they include in the kit. If you compare that to something like a Micro Swiss or a Phaetus Dragonfly that will also directly bolt in, those don't come with a heater or thermistor, but they're only $60 about there. No review is complete without cons, and this is not an ad. That thermistor harness coming with the DuPont connector on there was a pretty big negative to me. Yeah, you could probably stick it on there and it would probably work, but it should simply be a JST XH. You're gonna have to splice your wiring to get it right or recrimp it like I did. And then the biggest problem is gonna be the nozzles, their price and availability. Right now on printed solid, a single Revo nozzle is $24.85. I've recently been using genuine E3D nozzles for my V6 variants and my Volcano hot ends, but they're still not nearly the price of a Revo nozzle. And there's the fact that E3D has patented this design. It's proprietary. So how soon are we gonna see other manufacturers making these since they'll have to license them? Who knows? Hasn't hit the market yet, and it's been 9 months now that the Revo's been available. One that some people are really caught up on, I'm personally not, but I can see why. No hardened nozzles are currently available for the Revo. They're supposedly right around the corner, but they're not available as of this review. so I can't include that. I'll update the description when they are available. Is the Revo for everybody? No, it simply isn't. You want really high flow rate for high speed, something like my Voron V0 or my Voron 2.4 builds? I'm not putting the Revo in those. I want higher flow rates. You're running a farm. The consumable costs are just too high to be changing out nozzles, even, once a month. I think it would add up real quick to your costs. But if you only have 1, 2, 3 machines, something like my Ender 3 where I'm not looking to push the envelope on speed, I love having the option of changing nozzles so easily. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please drop a like, it really helps out. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Revo system? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Get subscribed to keep up to date with all the content and to ensure your prints don't fail. No guarantee on that, but can't hurt. Thanks for coming around, folks.